Hello, and thank you for joining us today for an opportunity to get to know your Utah Senate District 19 candidates, to learn more about their platforms and legislative priorities as you prepare to vote in the 2020 Utah Republican primary election. My name is Lacey Richards. I'm the chair of the Weber County Republican Party. Tonight, I'm joined by our two candidates for the Senate District 19 seat, Johnny Ferry and John Johnson. For tonight's event, we will begin with a 90-second opening statement by each candidate. We will then ask our candidates questions that have been submitted by constituents. Each will have 90 seconds to respond. If a candidate is mentioned in the other candidate's response, that candidate may choose to utilize a 30-second rebuttal. We are committed to using viewers' time wisely, so we will be closely following the time limits set. The order of responses has been randomly determined. At the end of our question time, each candidate will have 90 seconds for closing remarks. Let's begin. We will first hear from John Johnson.
Lacey, thank you very much for hosting this debate. It's always a pleasure to be able to talk directly to voters. A little bit about myself. My name's John Johnson. I would say I'm not a flashy politician. I don't come from a political family. I like to say I'm a bit of a nerd. I mean, I love working on computers. I've done that my whole career. I'm a self-made man. I was the first to graduate in my family from college. I went on to get a PhD in economics at Texas A&M University. I became a professor, first in economics, then in information systems. And then when I was at the University of Mississippi, I started a software company at the beginning of the internet boom, and it was an interesting time. And we basically built a system to manage the collateral on mortgage loans. It's kind of fun to be able to say today that that there isn't a mortgage loan that's closed in the country that doesn't touch something that we created.
Great, thank you. Now we'll move on to Johnny Ferry for his opening statement.
Thank you, Lacey. First off, thanks to John as well for being here. And it's a pretty neat experience to go through this as a candidate. I have not held political office prior to this. This is a new experience. And so this has been definitely an adventure. And for all those who have supported and got us to this point, I'm really appreciative and grateful. As a kid, I grew up on a farm. I come from an agricultural background. My family has, for 5 generations, farmed up in northern Utah. And as a kid, I grew up working on the farm. As I progressed in life and spent time in college at BYU, I took a position with a company called Honeywell. We're a food manufacturer. In fact, I'm here in my Honeywell office now. I take pride in the work that we've done here. I've been here for 20 years. I've helped pioneer and develop our business development process, which is really to go out and to be innovative in new products. And as my wife and I considered the opportunity to run for office, this was something that just good timing in our lives. My kids, I have 4 kids. My oldest is a senior in high school, and it's become a real blessing for us to be able to be in our community. I live in Pleasant View. My wife's a 2nd grade teacher. She teaches at the Weber School District, and as I listen to the needs that she has brought up as.
All right, looks like we're out of time. Thank you so much, Johnny and John. So for our first question, we're going to discuss the economy, kind of a hot button issue right now. First to answer this will be Johnny Ferry, followed by John Johnson. With Utah entering an economic recession and tax revenues decreasing, cuts to the 2021 state budget are necessary. Which departments or areas of government do you think should be considered for reduced spending? Johnny.
This is going to be a challenge really for the immediate and long term. This is going to be, as we come out of this, the COVID, the effect of the COVID, and to be honest, we're not out of it. We still have a lot to go to as a community and as a support to what we have to do in order to be better at and get back to where we were before all of this hit. I am in the private sector. I'm here. I will walk out of this meeting and I'll go walk out on my production lines, and we actually have a COVID training that we are going to be doing. We have to get back to work. We have to get our people back to work, and to provide the type of incentives and to take and look at the budgetary needs that are going to come as we get people back to work, and those incomes that will come into the system from being able to, as a legislature, then to help set those budgets and the needs of the budgets. It'll all come down to how fast can we get the economy back and going. I believe I have the experience hands-on that I have to currently make payroll, and I will have to be able to apply those same kind of principles as I go forward as a state senator.
Thank you, Johnny. John, same question for you.
You know, this is an interesting point in time for us. You know, and I always like to say that necessity is the mother of invention. And, you know, when families have shortfalls, they need to make cuts. And the state is composed of families, just like you and me. And is it fair to ask citizens to continue to pay when they are having cutbacks themselves? And I think these are things that we really have to keep in mind. We have to always keep that in mind. You know, in my company, I remember the savings and loan crisis and some of the things that happened there, which actually got our company started. And then all of a sudden we had this mortgage meltdown. And in 2008, and other companies were trying to find ways to survive, we found ways to thrive. And the way we did it was we focused on the core of the problem. And, you know, when you talk about priorities for cutting different departments, I think this is an overall picture that we have to look at. We have to look at the budgets everywhere, and we have to say, what are the essential services? Where can we find waste first, and then where can we start to cut back? But my focus is always on the family, right? And you know, any government program, we have to analyze, is it really fair to take money of a family's pocket and put it into the government's?
Thank you both. Our second question also deals with financial affairs of the state. For this question, Johnny Ferry will start, and then we'll go to John Johnson. You have both stated that you supported the 2019 tax referendum movement that was a factor in the Utah legislature deciding to repeal their 2019 tax reform bill. What specifically did you do to support the referendum, and how do you plan to work to address the revenue imbalances that prompted the tax reform legislation?
So from the beginning, the consideration of the initiative to repeal the tax reform, that was always part of has been and always has been part of my dialogue with my close associates, people who I it was I signed the tax referendum. I supported it that way, vocal supporter within my own community, and as we look at what we need to do specifically going forward, is it comes down to what will there be at play? What given the effect, we don't know the overall effect, but once we have that in front of us, be decisions of taking and how can you take specific parts of the tax code and be able to say, we need to reduce taxes in one area and consider ways that we can meet those budgets. I truly believe taxes need to be limited to support our limited government. We have to meet essential public needs, and I'd be a strong advocate over overtaxation, oppose any bill that wastes taxpayer money.
Thank you very much. John?
You know, it's interesting, and I think this is a real distinguishing feature between Johnny and I. I was a leader from the first on the tax referendum. I was a large supporter. I helped raise the money for the tax referendum and actually provided a lot of my own money for it. And I think you have to look at a timeline here. While I was in this from the first, I think Johnny ended up signing the referendum at the last minute, you know, maybe a day before it was due. The other thing that I find unique is that I got a robocall last night from the governor, and then I started looking at the endorsements that have just come in for Johnny, and every one of those people was behind the tax bill in the first place. And if you look at my supporters were largely against this. And I have always been a champion from the very first of this. I took big risks myself. I didn't wait till the last minute when it was evident that this tax referendum was going to be successful. And I'm a big believer that we don't take money out of people's pockets in an unwarranted way. I think we first have to look at spending cuts, and then I think we have to look at, no doubt there's
All right, thank you, John. Looks like we're out of time there. Johnny, would you like to utilize your rebuttal or move on to the next question?
No, I'll definitely comment on that. As you look and the timing of supporting this initiative as well, this was something that always has been part of my dialogue and on my mind. And I look at the as far as the support and the conversations actually that I continue to have with those people who have endorsed me and that we had at the time as well. I against what their action, and I truly believe in my own action that I did sign that tax referendum for a purpose that I truly believed in, and that is and that's what I did. So.
All right, thank you both. We're going to switch gears a little bit with this next question. John Johnson will be answering this one first, and then Johnny Ferry. On which Senate committees would you like to serve? How do you envision using your personal talents and unique experiences to benefit your constituents in District 19?
I think I would really like to serve on the higher ed committee. One of the things that concerns me in our education system, and even the education committee, one of the things that concerns me in our universities today is I think our universities have largely been taken over by people who have agendas that are, I like to call them the postmodernists. And I think there needs to be a little pushback into the dialogue that goes on. I can't believe how many of our students think that socialism is a good idea. And if you really look into it, you find out that, this isn't happening by chance. It's happening because of a concerted effort, I believe. And I think it's time for us to push back just a little bit. I'm a big believer in academic freedom. I believe in the freedom of speech. I believe that both sides should be heard. And, I believe in diversity, but the thing I believe in the most is diversity of thought. We have to have open dialogue about the problems we have today.
Thank you, John. Johnny, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, honestly, where I would love to be is somewhere where it is ideas are generated, committees where you will find things like economic development and make committees that would be more geared towards stimulating the economy. I'd also be involved. I obviously come from the agricultural background, land management, conservation. Those type of issues are very important to me. I just because of my own personal experience, I know how to take an idea and a product to budget for that and then to execute. Take an idea to the position where we can get it implemented in such a way that will improve our Utah infrastructure. That's the kind of committee. That's the kind of person I'd like to be involved with. I'm the kind of guy that you get a group of people at the table, and I'm very open to take ideas and to enhance those ideas and to hear voices while we're sitting at the table. And that's how I've done it and been successful in business. And I would seek to be in have influence in those types of committees.
Thank you both. Some great information from both of you. Our next question deals with affordable housing. Affordable housing, and John Johnson, you're going to start this one again, followed by Johnny Ferry. Affordable housing is an important topic in our state. How do you propose to balance the need to address housing affordability in the context of our current housing crisis with the concept of the importance of local control, as well as the desire of some communities not to participate? John.
Well, I see, one of the issues that I really see, and I like to analyze problems this way, and is what is the proper role of government? Where does government play a role? What are the individual rights? At first, we have these rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To begin, it was life, liberty, and property, right? And I believe in property rights of individuals. We really have to address these issues. I mean, we've got a gentrification of our population, really, especially in areas like Provo and others. Okay, and so I think when analyzing these problems, you have to say, are there regulations that are actually keeping these things from happening? I know there's a lot of rules in Provo, for instance, that you can't have a mother-in-law apartment in your own house. You can't have a family that rents your basement. As you get older, you may have a large house, and that might be a possibility. And you say, well, what is it that are keeping these things from happening? Because it certainly reduces the supply in the market. You have a landlocked place like Provo where you really, you really have no place to grow. And so we have to look at those issues. Why are communities blocking this? There is this NIMBY thing that, it's not in my backyard. You can build a park somewhere.
Thank you. All right, Johnny, your thoughts on affordable housing and the state's role?
Sure. The state's, honestly, for me, it's anything that encourages free enterprise, private initiative is important to me. I believe market forces will dictate that regulation, and that the government's role is going to be limited in it. I believe that as we promote high quality jobs, we've got our we encourage our local education opportunities to support these types of jobs. Ultimately, you are benefiting the communities through the economic growth. And as you do that, then that opens up opportunities for property ownership and a better life. So I would support business-friendly planning. I would support economic growth, particularly in the roadways, water usage, the air quality infrastructures that need to be built in order to continue to grow and expand the ever-increasing population. That'll provide, and as we do that, that'll provide a greater pool of funding that we can get for support other areas of our local communities, and whether that be in law enforcement or educational needs. So that's how I look at it, and more as a free market approach.
Thank you both. All right, we're going to switch gears again for our next question. John Ferry is going to answer first, followed by John Johnson. Civil asset forfeiture laws, which allow law enforcement to seize money and other property from people who may not have been charged with any crime, have been criticized by civil liberty advocates. Should Utah reform its civil asset forfeiture laws to replace civil asset forfeiture with criminal asset forfeiture? Why or why not?
Very specific question, obviously. Maybe it goes back to the role of, I think going back to the role of government. So government exists because of the consent of the governed, of us. And government should be restrained from intruding upon the freedoms of our citizens, of us. We have to appreciate the productive citizen and earn that infinite worth of each of those individuals. So specifically on controlling civil assets and being able to take those would be something that just like any issue, I'm open to say that I'd like to see both parts of the debate and understand what specifically is at stake and what is being proposed in the law at the time. Obviously, with the changing issues that are going on within our own society, I believe that we look at this as a bigger issue of the role that we have in enforcement and law enforcement. And I think that this will continue to be a challenge as we go forward, particularly with what's going So I would approach that as a case by case and review that at the time as that's proposed and what kind of changes are being made specific to those. Thanks.
Thank you, Johnny. John, your thoughts on civil asset forfeiture law?
This is not a case by case issue. This is theft, pure and simple. I mean, there's cases across the country where a case in that where two aunts were living in a house. Their nephew just happened to visit, and when that happened, actually, the police actually seized the property of the two aunts because the nephew was involved in some criminal activity. He was just visiting the place, and they lost their property. Now, my major problem is due process thing. I mean, this is just like red flag laws that we're trying to put forward, right? People have a right to due process, and under civil asset they don't even have to have probable cause that you as the asset owner were involved in the crime. And so, going to the criminal aspect for, idea, I think we have to look at that and say, well, what is the text of the bill and what are they trying to accomplish with it? But as far as this process we have right now, and I understand, it was to break up cartels and be able to do something about what was going on. But civil asset for, this is theft, pure and simple.
Thank you both for your thoughts on that topic. Our next question, we will have John Johnson answer first and then Johnny Ferry. What ideas do you have to encourage and increase the political and social involvement of our youth in our communities? John.
Well, I think number one, it starts with education and the education process. It's a little bit disgusting to think about when Common Core standards came into the U.S. that if you look across the country, the number one text in our high school is the People's History of the United States, written by Howard Zinn, who was a communist from the 60s. When President Obama said he was going to fundamentally change the country, we have to really be leery about that, because this has happened. And too many of our youth believe that socialism is a good idea. Why do they believe that? What is it that they were taught? I believe in education and not indoctrination. I think that both sides of the story should be told. I think students should be encouraged to read Karl Marx, right? But they should also be encouraged to read the Theory of Moral Sentiments and The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. I think that these problems really start with education, and we need to do a better job of having a broad-based education that really addresses all of these issues and gives a fair hearing to both sides.
Thank you, John. Over to you, Johnny.
Yeah, this is something that I feel very passionate about. 4 kids, and all of them growing up in our home have been given opportunities to participate and have thoughts and to review what it is to truly be a conservative and to be a Republican. I would say this. I think the biggest thing is we have a disconnect with our youth, because if I look at this as a sale of a product or a sale of an idea, there has to be some flash, some sexiness, something that pulls me in. And we have really missed that in being able to market that to our youth. There is definitely a disconnect that our youth have, because I look at I check my kids' posts and their phones and all of that. And it's somewhat disappointing to see the type of social media that gets out there and just down talk that is given to conservative viewpoints and our morals and our standards and everything that goes with that. To ignite the youth, you got to have a cause. You got to have something that they can rally around. You have to have energetic leaders and people who will, when they see them, they connect and it puts a smile on their face, and it makes them want to come out and participate. That's the type so they can appreciate the great conservative values that we have. That's the type of things that I think we need in order to connect with our youth.
Thank you both. Our next question will start with Johnny Ferry and then go to John Johnson. District judges appointed by the governor are subject to the approval of the Senate. What factors would you consider when deciding to approve or disapprove a candidate nominated by our next governor? Johnny.
In my role as a business owner, we have about 500 employees, and there is been numerous times throughout my career that I've had to sit and judge an individual based on, one, the resume, based on the interview, based on their ability and skill set that we may trial them on production lines and things like that. I would approach this the same. I would look at this as an individual. You have, you have to know the individual to be able to review them individually. But there's also more that goes into that. As you look at the broader sense of an individual's and their decision making and things that they have done, their historical record of how they've either presented themselves or cases that they have tried or reviewed, I would suggest that there is a judgment that does have to be made. And as you're judging that and as you're watching, there's certain things that you would look for. Conservative values. You would look for what is their background, what kind of things have they done as an individual, what's their family life like, what is their who do they associate with. All of those would be important questions for me in reviewing those judges, those opportunities.
Thank you, Johnny. John, your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm a big believer in the proper role of government, and I think the number one thing I would look at is, do these individuals actually understand the Constitution and the role of the judiciary? We've had a real problem in this country with judges who believe they are legislators. And I think we have to really get back to, is this judge a judge that is going to decide cases based on the law and the canon of the law, or are they going to try to be activist in that position? I think competence of the judges is really important. We have to make sure they're well trained. We have to make sure that they have the proper mindset. But I think the most important thing, I don't care what their political philosophy is, as long as they understand the proper role of the judiciary and they're going to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and they're not going to try to legislate from the bench. And that's so important. It's something that, it's actually something that I've thought about a lot. And I think it's something that we have to turn the tide on. We have to roll back to a point in time where judges actually took that oath seriously.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Johnny. Our last question will go first to Johnny and then to John Johnson. Should the legislature make any changes to the SB 54 legislation that altered how political parties select their candidates? If so, how do you envision that being accomplished? Johnny.
The answer immediately is yes. I believe that there is some reform that needs to be made. And if whatever the appetite is for the legislature to make that happen, I would be an advocate for change. The challenge that I think ultimately you have is participation. How do we get participation at the caucus level? How do we get participation at the convention level? And making sure that as we've experienced this now and gone through the convention process, the key thing to me is that the representation is great. It becomes greater. That it becomes such that we get participation, people coming out, so that the concern of the few who might be involved with the process, that there is more involvement in. There's not such a drastic change from those people who run the convention route and those that ultimately are brought through the primaries. There has to be, there definitely does need to be changes. I I would not want to go through what I've done and go through that again on the signature route. I do believe that in order for this to work, I would be very open to make changes to SB 54.
Thank you, Johnny. John, your thoughts on SB 54?
I think it's probably the most destructive law we've had in the state of Utah. If you think about it, we've got 4 candidates for governor, and essentially we may have a governor that's elected to our state won by a plurality of votes. Okay, not even a majority of the people voting for them. We had some that went the signature route. We had one that went convention only. I think it's a violation actually of the freedom of association of parties. The Republican Party should have the right to vet its candidates based on the platform of the party, and to understand. I decided very early on that I was a convention-only candidate, and I decided that because I think that the grassroots of our party is strong. And no doubt, you know, we could work on things like more participation, to get more people involved. But you even look at the tax referendum issue. Okay, we had over 170,000 people sign that, and that's probably one of the greatest grassroots efforts to happen. Why do we want to kill the grassroots? I found the convention delegates to be very conscientious. They vetted candidates very carefully. I appreciate the dedication that they had, especially in a situation where we didn't have our caucus meetings, where things were held virtually.
All right. Thank you both. That concludes the question portion of our event. Before we go on to closing statements, I'd just like to again thank those constituents who submitted questions for our event tonight. We will now hear 90-second closing statements from each candidate, beginning with Ferry. Johnny.
Thank you. Hey, and thanks to those who submitted the questions. Great questions. As I look at this, I think about the influencers who have been there in my life, as ultimately my parents, growing up, teaching me the values and the basic conservative principles that I learned as a farm boy, and which I translated into my success as a business owner. I look at the opportunities that are in front of us right now. I'm the type of guy that I found success in bringing voices to the table. I would look to be very open. I have an open door. I love to have, and as we've gone through this process, getting the different perspectives from different constituents. This has been a real joy in my life, and I would consider that as I office as your next state senator, that it would have that same opportunity to see me, to talk to me, to work through, and have voice representation at the table as well, and the decision makers. That is what that's why I'm seeking this office. I really believe that I can contribute to this great state. As I look for future opportunities and where the state goes, we have so much in front of us. We have so many opportunities to learn from what has happened recently with COVID. With some of the civil unrest that's going on, to take that and to learn and make this a momentum change going forward. I'm excited to be part of that, and I appreciate your vote as your next state senator. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, that was Johnny Ferry. We'll go to John Johnson for closing statement, please.
You know, being an academic is a little bit of a disadvantage. Number one, people automatically assume that I'm a liberal. Number two, people automatically assume that I have a feeling that I'm always right. One of the things I've learned through education is that the more I learn, the more I really don't know much. Okay, and why am I running, and what is this all about? Let me tell you, I have a firm belief in the First Amendment right of freedom of association, speech, and religious freedom. I believe that we have a Second Amendment, a right to bear arms. And this right is a right guaranteed to us. Okay, I got an A rating from it's actually AQ based on a questionnaire from the National Rifle Association. I will defend that right. I believe in fair and equitable tax policy, which should always consider spending first. I believe in the proper role of government, okay? Being an entrepreneur, it gives me an understanding of running and building a business. Being a professor gives me insight into our education system and the problems in higher education. We educate, not indoctrinate. Being a parent gives me insight into our primary and secondary education system and understanding that the closer decisions are to parents, the better. Being an economist and data scientist gives me an insight into our.
Right. Again, thank you both. Tonight we've been joined by John and Johnny Ferry, the candidates running for Senate District 19. Both of them will be on your Republican primary ballot. For more information on the Weber County Republican Party and for more voter resources, we'd encourage you to visit our website or our Facebook page, which are both linked in the description below. Thank you both very much for joining us tonight. You both did a great job of letting voters get to know you and what you stand for. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Lacey.
Thank you. Thank you very much.